Oh, hello. Today we are wrapping up my reading for the month of May 2022, and wow. I was pulling the stats, and I should do some research to see if this is true. I know I say this a lot. That's part of why I feel like I need to do research, but I'm not joking. I think by the numbers, this might be the best reading month I've ever had, at least on the channel. I'm trying to think. I mean, we'll get there, but my average rating, I can't remember a higher average rating. I can't remember having this many 4.5 and 5 stars in a month, which for me, 4.5 is best of the year, 5 is an all-time favorite. So it's been a wild month. I guess that makes sense because in terms of the projects I was working on, one was Goodreads recommendations, which tend to be for pretty popular books. So I guess it makes sense I would like some of those. And then the patron 5-star prediction blog. So also strong books included in that. So yeah, I'm just delighted. I love it when I get to come and say hey, I'm loving what I'm reading right now, which is definitely the case. So without further ado, let's jump in. We'll talk about some stats and then we will talk about my hits, my surprises, and my disappointments. Obviously, I have a lot of hits this time around. Okay, so I read a total of 24 books in the month of May, and that's actually the fewest number of books in a month that I've read so far in 2022, because I've just been really in the mood to read the last few months. I read a total of 8,327 pages for an average book length of 347 pages. I've got my stats are pulled up, but my eyes cannot fully read how small this text is. I could enlarge it, but why would I make my life easier? The average age of book that I read was 13 years old, and the average amount of time a book had been on my TBR was 1 year. I paid for 33% of the books that I read, and the average amount that I paid for a book was $3.17. Biggest two single sources of books for me this month were Amazon and publishers. I got through a good number of ARCs this month. And then in terms of genre split, definitely the biggest was mystery, which makes sense because one of the vlogs that I was working on was a Goodreads mystery recommendation vlog. So I was reading 8 books, I think, for that, and I read several of them in this month. So yeah, it makes sense that I read a lot of those, but I also read, I think the runners-up were speculative romance, unsurprising. You guys know I love sci-fi and fantasy romance, and then really fantasy and nonfiction were kind of my two biggest ones after that. Then as I mentioned, rating-wise, I cannot think of a month where it was higher. So my average rating was 3.79, and then in terms of the distribution, I had 5 4.5 stars, 2 5 stars, 7 4 stars. And then I did have a few that I didn't like as much. I had a couple of 2 and 2.5 stars, but yeah, I was reading things that I was really enjoying this month for the most part, which is a lovely, lovely feeling. And then before we get into the hits, surprises, and disappointments, let's talk about a few books that you will not see in those categories, but were a part of challenges. Primarily, I think this time, really, I just want to talk about a few arcs that I'm not going to cover in those other categories. So, okay, really just 2. Both of these I really enjoyed. I found both of these very entertaining. They just weren't, I think frankly, at least one of these could have been a hit in a different month, but it just was such a strong month that they didn't quite make the cut. So, first of all, The It Girl from Ruth Ware. I am going to tell you, I enjoyed this book, but this reminds me so much of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead, which I happen to have read earlier in the month. So I wonder if some of my enjoyment was dissipated by that, because this is very much dual timeline, trying to solve the murder of, in this group of friends at university, trying to solve a past murder that happened to one of the people in their group. In this setup, basically they thought that they put away the person who did the murder. Our main point of view character was the main witness against him, and then he dies in prison, and there's all these questions coming back up of if he ever, if he was the one who really did it. I think that this one is also a different dynamic in the sense that there's a romantic element, kind of like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, but in this case she is with the guy who she's has a romantic element with in the present timeline, and she's pregnant. So that adds kind of another layer of menace, and also it introduces sort of almost a domestic thriller kind of dynamic, because she's wondering if he did it because he was a part of the friend group. So it was good. I think it was very predictable. Like, I don't know that this brought a lot of interesting things to the table in terms of tropes, but I gave it a 3.5 because Ruth Ware's writing and character work I always feel like is kind of a cut above. So it was entertaining enough, which is the main thing I want from a book like this. I think if you were looking for like, oh, I've never read this twist before, this is not the book for that at all. But I don't really necessarily always need that. So I don't know. I'm wondering, I could see this one not necessarily being a huge hit for some people because I think people who enjoy thrillers often really want that surprise factor, which isn't as important to me, but I think is important to a lot of people. And I don't know that this delivered a big, like, oh my God, kind of twist moment. So anyway, good, B+, entertaining, not the best I've read from Ruth Ware. Yeah, I mean, when this comes out in July, if you were looking for a fun thriller for vacay, I think that this will do ya. Similarly, Stay Awake by Megan Golden. I think Megan Golden is officially an auto read for me. I don't know if she's an auto buy, but I really like the way she does her thrillers. I think that they're very entertaining. I've been thoroughly entertained by all three that I've read. I would say The Night Swim is definitely the strongest of the three I've read, but both this one, Stay Awake, and The Escape Room, I just had a good time in. I feel like they're very just page-turnery. She tends to have kind of a high premise, which I appreciate. That's something I really like in a thriller. In this one, our main point of view character wakes up and realizes she doesn't remember anything about like what's happened in her life for the last 2 years. And so we have a point of view from her. We also have a point of view from a police detective who is investigating the murder that kind of is happening in the present timeline. And then we are also getting our main point of view character's point of view from the past. As you guys know, that's always my least favorite, but this one I was pretty okay with because it was pretty evenly balanced between all three. And I think that part of what's interesting about this is I've seen this premise in film before, like you can think Memento. There's a few kind of well-known TV shows or movies that have this sort of like amnesia, like your main character constantly has amnesia and is like writing notes to themselves and trying to like remember what has gone on since they last had a memory gap. This one I think is the first time I've ever seen that tried to be done in book form, and I actually think it was pretty successful at it. I will say one thing I wish is that I think our main character was so wishy-washy in her past timeline and kind of like just dim. And I think it would have been a more effective contrast for her to have been really on top of things, really together, very sharp and intelligent, perceptive point of view in the past. I think that would have been a better contrast to the current timeline where she is very disoriented, very confused, obviously, because she is having this amnesia issue. So I wish that that had been sort of the contrast, and I think that that would have made this book great. And I'm also super excited to see a POV detective included in a thriller. I feel like a lot of these big pushed thrillers don't tend to have that, and I personally prefer a non-PI POV detective, and I just don't know that we get that a lot. We get a lot of like wives investigating their husbands in thrillers these days, or sometimes we do get a PI, or I like an amateur sleuth kind of angle as well, so like a true crime podcaster, like that tends to work for me, but we just don't get a lot of detective POV in thriller, so I was excited to see that, and I thought that that was pretty well handled, and I would not be mad if she does more thrillers with these detectives that get established. Yeah, I liked them, and I would be interested in seeing more thrillers with that kind of like way into the story or that kind of point of view included. So I gave this 4 stars. I was very entertained by this, and I think it's a high premise that has flaws, but I think is mostly entertaining enough for you to, at least for me, I kind of just like ran with plot holes, ran with any flaws that I saw because I was being just generally entertained. Okay, and so let's move into our main categories. I only have 2 disappointments that I flagged, and I should say neither of these were bad. I gave both of these 3 stars, which is a B. They were just disappointments relative to my expectations for the particular author and what I've enjoyed from their work in the past. So one of them you can see at length in my Patrons Predict 5-star books for me vlog, which is my best friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. The only reason this is disappointing at a 3-star is because I gave the prior 2 books that I read from him 4.5. This is definitely, did I give this 3? Oh, no. I actually even gave this 3.5 stars, but I gave the prior 2 4.5. It was between a 3 and a 3.5 on this one, but I bumped it up because I do just really love the way that he does complicated female friendships in his books. So that still delivered for me. It was fine. I just don't think it had the same sort of propulsive quality to the prose that I've come to expect from Grady Hendrix. So that's why I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a disappointment. Still gonna read more from him going forward. I have other books from him coming from his backlist that I'm hoping I'm gonna get to. So yeah, this isn't like I'm giving up on Grady Hendrix. It's just the book from him I've liked the least so far from what I've read. And then I just finished an arc of Quarter to Midnight by Karen Rose, which I did give a 3-star to because I really like the way Karen Rose does her romantic suspense. It's unlike anything that I quite have read in the genre, which is it has sort of like these bursts of action followed by 100 pages of hangout time with our main characters. So it's sort of like frenetic energy and then very slow burn, and then frenetic energy and then very slow burn. I just don't know that I've read another author who kind of paces their books like that, and I really enjoy it. I had a good enough time in this book. Like I, kept turning the pages happily. I think the reason this one didn't fully work for me, so the setup for this one is we're in New Orleans. So this is the first, all of her mini trilogies or her mini series exist within this overall world. So it's like kind of one long running series, but then it has sort of like discrete trilogies or whatever within that. This is the first one in New Orleans. The trope combo, I think, for this one just wasn't my favorite. So basically it's like a corruption on the force, like corrupt justice system kind of suspense trope of like, hey, there's a dirty cop or dirty cops around and we're trying to figure out like what it is, like what part of their corruption they're hiding and why have they been killing people related to this unknown thing that they're doing. I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil the book. But anyway, so like that's kind of the trope, and I can like that. Actually, my favorite in Death book is around internal investigation, dirty cops stuff. This one, I don't know, just for some reason the way that it played out just wasn't my favorite, and I didn't love the hero in this one. Male point of view in this one, just I don't know. There's just something about it that didn't totally click for me. So yeah, this just felt like a disappointment because I think I've read like 6 or 7 other books from her, and I think I gave like one other one a 3-star. I usually give her books at least a 3.5, so this is definitely one of my lesser books from her, but I still think it's pretty entertaining. I'm not like mad that I read it, I won't remember it in a year, and I don't necessarily feel that compelled to read more from this particular trilogy, but this is a good reminder that maybe I should go back and read some more of her backlist, because there's plenty to be read there. But I don't know, I'll see what the next book's trope combo is. If it's one that I like better, maybe I'll give it a try, but yeah, just a little disappointing to me. Okay, and then we have 3 surprises. I have a 4-star, a 4.5, and a 5-star surprise. So, 4-star surprise, I'm gonna say is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry, because I just had no idea what I was really getting in for with this book, and I found this delightful. I had, some quibbles with it that kept it from being a full 4.5 for me, but this is just such, to me, a really quirkily funny book. Like, this made me laugh out loud a lot. It's very wacky, and I just don't know that I've read another book that has quite the same tone this has. It's, I guess you could call it a coming of age story in the 1980s around a field hockey team who sell their souls to the devil to be better at field hockey. That's, I guess, kind of the pitch. Part of what's also interesting is that this is a singular plural point of view, so everything is we whatever. Like, you talk about the second person, which we will for another book, where it's you do this, you do that. This is a we did this, we did that kind of point of view. And I don't know that I've ever read a book like that before. I thought that it was executed really well. All of the characters, despite being of this one collective mind, I think felt distinct. Yeah, this was just really different, and I'm really glad this was in that Patrons Pick My TBR vlog. I'm really glad that they pushed me to read this, because I don't know that I would have gotten to it otherwise, and I really enjoyed this. This is just different, And I think if you get on with the humor, even if it's not a favorite, I think you'll not be mad that you read it. I could see, though, it's a very strong flavor, so not everybody's gonna like that flavor, but for me, this was really entertaining and really worked. My 4.5 surprise is Never Coming Home by Kate Williams, because I'm gonna say this is definitely one of my favorite new releases I've read so far this year. I think it just got bumped by one of the hits we're going to talk about as my favorite arc that I've read this year. I didn't really have it on my radar. I picked it up on a whim because I saw somewhere somebody talking about it as a new release that was a YA and then there were none retelling, which I'm an absolute sucker for. So I always kind of expect I'm not going to love those books, but I still read them. I don't know, maybe some schadenfreude there, but I expected this to be at least like entertaining because I love the trope and it's a story that I'm familiar with and enjoy, but this is one of the best And Then There Were None retellings I've ever encountered. I think it did a great job of honoring the original source material. There's a lot of direct allusions to or parallels to And Then There Were None. I think if you've read that book, you can you're on the lookout for a few things. So I definitely think that this is paying strong homage to that, but it really makes it its own, I think. I think it made this recontextualized for 2022, and it's particularly focused on sort of social media influencers. Like, that's everyone who's been invited to the island is some version of a social media star. So it's sort of And Then There Were None meets Fire Festival, maybe. It is brutal, guys. Like, this is YA, but it is brutal AF. Like, it is very violent and has a lot more stabbiness to it than I would have expected. So I don't know. This was just really intense and really great, and I did not see it coming at all, which is an allusion to one of the other titles of the books that we'll talk about. But yeah, I did not have this really on my radar. I was not expecting that this was going to be such a big hit for me, but it is. I highly recommend this book if you have similar kind of mystery/thriller taste to me. It is coming out, I think at the end of June, like the 21st-ish. And I will tell you, I think that this could be a good bridging book because it is so intense and it's definitely older protagonists. If you are somebody who doesn't normally read YA, this might be a good way to try some YA mystery thriller. Or if you were looking to transition to more adult mystery thriller, I think this could be a good gateway into that as well, because I think it definitely sort of sits in that nebulous area. Like, yeah, I kind of almost feel the same way about this as I did Sadie by Courtney Summers, which is like, is this really YA? Like, at least in this case, some of the protagonists are truly like 17 and 18, so I guess it's new adult, maybe, mystery thriller. So yeah, big surprise because I absolutely loved it and had no expectation that I would. I'm also putting one of my 5 stars in the surprise category rather than the hit, just because the journey, like what this book means to me on a personal level and the surprise factor here. And I should disclaim I'm about to talk about religion, which I know some people get uptight about, so I understand. Like, feel free to, just click until you don't see this book up on the screen anymore if you don't want to hear about that. But How Jesus Became God by Bart Ehrman. The personal journey with this book is just that when I was in high school, definitely in college, and then definitely in, like, very much so by grad school, Bart Ehrman was one of those sort of like bad guys. So he is a professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So I, like, kind of in our wider, I was in crew in college. And so in our overall region, there were people like taking his classes. And I think there was like a whole mission to try to like save people's faith on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill after taking his classes. So what is he technically a professor of? One of the most renowned and controversial biblical scholars of the world today. So he would like teach like New Testament in a university setting. And he originally was a fundamentalist, but essentially like lost his faith over the course of like studying the New Testament more and more. And he has written a lot of books that are basically sort of like talking about how we got the Bible, how different sort of like early ideas about Christianity came to be and why different ones sort of won the day. He had, I remember the one that I dared to read back when I was an evangelical was Misquoting Jesus, because it was about, I think, like the translation process for the King James. So that was sort of like one of the safer books to read. But anyway, he was such a boogeyman. Like, he will destroy your faith. Like, he hates Christians and he's just trying to like ruin everyone's faith, which now that I've seen some like interviews with him, he seems like a perfectly lovely man who I think just wants to make this information accessible to people. And I think what is really compelling about this particular book is that I don't know that I needed or wanted this book when I was first deconstructing, but because I have become so in the weeds with Mormon Stories podcast recently, I've just been thinking about a lot of this stuff more and like having a deeper deconstruction, or sort of like the next layer of deconstruction. And this was the book that I needed in this moment. Part of what is so compelling about this book is that all of the facts, like pretty much all the facts that he lays out, are completely undisputed by believing Protestant scholars of the New Testament. I can say that because I have been in their classrooms. The underlying facts, there weren't like a ton of new things. What is different is how he then draws out the implications of those facts. When he started doing some of that, I was like, yeah, that is a much better explanation of the facts than what I've ever heard in the different classroom settings I've been in. Definitely much better than the different church settings I've been in. And the basic thesis is just that when Jesus was preaching, he did not think of himself or claim to be God in the sense that later theology kind of put on him based on what we know. It makes a lot of sense with what I know about early Christian history. It makes a lot of sense about the development of theology that I've studied. Like, yeah, his thesis, I think, is pretty logical, and to me is the most compelling compilation of the facts that we have. So I think the reason I'm putting this as a surprise is that I was so afraid of this book for many years. I remember I think this came out right towards the end of grad school and people being like, oh, yeah, it came out in 2014. So he's had like a number of books, and I was always so afraid to read him because I thought that he was like trying to destroy my faith. And now I think this was just such a benchmark to me of how much my perception of the world has changed and how my, appreciation for the kind of project he has going on here has changed. And frankly, just giving me language to articulate things that have been recently realized, like that I agree with or believe. So yeah, thank you, Bart. Thank you, Dr. Ehrman, for continuing my deconstruction process. He has a few other books that sound super interesting to me too, so I think I may dive into that. But 10 years ago, Mara would be just passed out from horror and shock to see me giving this 5 stars. How far the mighty have fallen, I guess, maybe is the takeaway. So let's move into our hits, and I feel like I've been talking a long time already, and I know that I've covered some of these more in other videos. So for ones that I've covered more in other videos, I will probably mostly point you there. So 2 4-star hits I want to mention. Both of them are romances. So first of all, Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood. You guys, I'm just trash for Ali Hazelwood at this point. She just does the tropes that I love, and I love seeing a novella. Also, this is a roommate's enemies to love trope. I think that these work better as novellas. This kind of concretized that for me. This just gave me that trope without drawing it out too much, without too many like miscommunication bits of like, he doesn't like me, but like obviously to the reader he does. I think that this had just enough of that. And we have some demisexual rep in this, which I thought was great. And the spiciness gave what it needed to give. And I just love Ali Hazelwood's writing. That's just the bottom line. So I know that these are available already as audio, but I've been waiting for them to come out as ebooks. So there was one in May, there will be one in June, there'll be the 3rd one in July. And if these are Star Wars fanfic, the fact that the main character is also named Mara, which I loved. And I'm wondering if this was originally like a Luke Mara extended universe fanfiction situation. That was kind of my thought on that. Anyway, I loved it. It was so great. Okay. Then When She's Lonely by Ruby Dixon, I also gave 4 stars to. And I love this, and this was really getting back to what I love in the Rizdiverse series, which is, I don't know, like, I don't know that there's very many Ruby Dixons that I just don't like. It's been a few books in Rizdiverse since she was really doing what I enjoy from the Rizdiverse, because I mean, I enjoyed the bad guy, worst guy thing, like that was fine. And then there was the one with Lucy, who was the cook. They were all fine. This one I feel like is just like true blue, what is good about Rizdiverse. It is, you know, a human woman who has trauma in her past, and we've got a hot Mesca alien dude who's fallen in love with her. This is also kind of this is another friends to lovers, actually. Both of these are enemies to friends to lovers. Both the Allie Hazelwood and the Ruby Dixon. I think that that's a trope I really love in the context of novellas. I really like the way both of them did these. They had enough tension of why they aren't together yet, but I felt like the payoff was really satisfying. I really liked our main characters together by the end. We also got some rep for hearing impairment, and I didn't realize that Ruby Dixon also has hearing impairment, so this was her like reflecting some of her experiences, apparently, according to the author's note. So I thought that was cool too. Yeah, just all around, I love this. I love Ruby Dixon, God bless her. She just gives me the crazy campy sci-fi alien romance that I love. I just love it. Okay, and I'm seeing if we've got any other hits that were 4 stars. No, okay, the rest of these are either 4.5 or 5. So we'll do 4.5s first, and I think all but one of these is in another vlog. So I'll mostly point you there if you want like the full rundown. The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. Is anyone surprised that I love this book? No, they are not. I already have the sequels. I mean, she is just, this is definitely my favorite thing I've read from her. This is the 3rd or 4th book I've read. This is my favorite. Her world building in this is fantastic. The writing is beautiful and not as intimidating as I had been very intimidated by this book. I found this actually not bad at all to read. Maybe it's because I've been reading so much Robin Hobb recently. Not that she's hard to follow, but like it's a more literary quality to the writing. So I don't know. For whatever reason, this was just not even, like, I was not intimidated by this at all once I got into it. This was fantastic. Absolutely lives up to the hype, and probably would have been 5 stars if I hadn't guessed The Thing based on some other things I'd heard people saying. So yeah, this is so good. Cannot wait to keep going in the series. Would not be surprised if this ends up being like an all-time favorite trilogy. Then Never Saw Me Coming by Vera Curran. I say the I and it looks like an L. Curran. This is just one of the most entertaining thrillers I've read in quite some time. Very high premise in the sense of it's basically following a group of students who are in a psychopathy study at their university, and a serial murderer starts serial killing them. This is very voicey, so I think if you like the voice, you'll really like this book. If you don't like that voice, you probably won't like the book. And I just found this so entertaining, so satisfying. I stayed up late to finish it, which is what bumped it from a 4 to a 4.5. If I'm being like objective, probably this is closer to a 4, but just for the sheer amount of entertainment that this gave me, I bumped it up to a 4.5. And yeah, this is just really fun. Again, if you're looking for like a good vacay read, I feel like this could be a good one for that. And then Empire of Pain by Patrick Keefe. Again, is anybody surprised I like this? This was also, along with the 5th Season, in my patrons pick, or like 5-star predictions for me. All 4 of the ones that I read in this month for that vlog ended up in one of these categories. So I had strong feelings about all of them. Empire of Pain is a beautifully done version of narrative nonfiction. I think it was a really interesting and ultimately smart approach that he took to the topic of opioid crisis here in the US. Basically, he is following the Sackler family throughout several generations, tracking kind of the history of Purdue Pharma and the creation of OxyContin, and how that entire kind of the way that the OxyContin epidemic ended up playing out, how a lot of that was presaged by the way that that company had been marketing Valium in earlier generations and what they had learned about pharmaceutical marketing from earlier generations. And yeah, I just think this is super compelling. Ultimately, my critique of it is that it is not focused enough, or I guess I most was engaged with this book when it was really the business parts of it. So while everything in the book is well done and interesting, I think I was most interested in the business stuff, and I could have done with more of that. So that's just personal preference though, and I think Patrick Keefe is quickly proving himself to be just like kind of the next, maybe like Michael Lewis or Eric Larson, where he is just so good at narrative nonfiction. The way he writes is beautiful. It's very compelling. I need to go back and finish Say Nothing. I just got distracted and didn't end up finishing that one. But anyway, so yeah, highly recommend. Not surprised people have been loving this one. You've surely heard of this book before from someone besides me. But I will just add myself to the list of people who really enjoyed this one. And then my last 4.5 stars, another arc, and it's the finale in a trilogy. So I don't really know what all I can say about this other than Ruby Fever by Alona Andrews is fantastic. It is so good and such a worthy finale to this trilogy. Now, I will tell you, I gave the original trilogy a 4.5, a 5, and a 5. I gave this trilogy, the second trilogy in the overall series, a 4.5, a 4, and a 4.5. So still excellent, but I will say I personally prefer the first trilogy. That's just me. But I also wonder if some of that is that I binge read that original trilogy because I waited. I apparently had enough self-control to wait until they were all out, and I did them in one big read. So I wonder if I had done that with this series, if I would have liked it even more, because I would have had like the boom, boom, boom of watching things unfold. But I also just think I'm maybe not as compelled by Catalina and Alessandro as I was by Rogan and Nevada. I don't know. So anyway, this is all that to say though. This is still excellent, and I think that this was a really good finale. Probably the best book in the trilogy. Alona Andrews is legendary for nailing the landing of their series. Yeah, this one I think was really satisfying and paid off a lot of the predictions that I had both from the first series and from this one. I think pretty much all my predictions came true, which I think is good because to me that says that they're like properly, these are kind of mystery, no, they're not even kind of, these are mystery plot engines to these speculative romances. And the sign of a good mystery, if it's like playing fair, is that you can kind of figure out what's happening. And I did. And it was very satisfying to see how all of that actually played out. There's this iconic scene with good old Grandma Tremaine that had me hee-hawing. We also, I am pleased to tell you, it seems like there's like this little, kind of teaser at the end from Arabella's point of view. So it indicates to me that we're probably getting a third trilogy from Arabella's perspective, which will be great. And I love her. I think the standout side character in this go-around was Matilda. I love her. She's so great. And I continue to really like her and Cornelius, and the more we're learning there. And I have ideas about how maybe they might come into the third trilogy based on who I think Arabella's dude is gonna be. So yeah, anyway, it was just so good. It was so satisfying. I love that series. I love Alona Andrews, and now I want more. The good news is my next season of my podcast is rereading The Innkeeper Chronicles and also reading Blood Heir. So I have more Alona Andrews coming in my life this year, which I'm very excited about. And all in all, God bless Alona Andrews, just delivering every time. Okay, and then my last hit and my other 5-star is Moonflower Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Again, you can see this in a blog, so I probably won't go on too long because I can see my camera is also about to overheat. This is excellent. This is exactly what I want from a mystery. This just was perfectly entertaining. It's a book within a book. We've got actual mystery. We've got the settings in the English countryside that I love. We've got character types I enjoy. And also the fact that I've seen all of his Midsummer Murder episodes now. It's fun because in his books, I'm like, ooh, you did that same plot beat in that episode. So that was fun too. Anyway, this is Excelente. I love this, and I can't wait to read his, I think it's called the Hathaway and Horowitz series. I've got 3 of those. Those are ones where he, the author, is a character in the series, so that should be interesting. He just, I don't know. I've pretty much enjoyed everything I've read. The first book I read from him was House of Silk, which was his Sherlock Holmes commissioned thing, and I thought that was a pretty good version of a Sherlock Holmes book. I don't know. I just really love the way he does murder mystery, and this was no exception. So 5 stars, one of my all-time favorite versions of a murder mystery. And with that, I think that caps off a wonderful month of reading. Lots of just delighted smiles over here from Mara because I read so many good books. I'm assuming, I don't know, I feel like that means that this next month is not going to be as good, but hopefully not. Hopefully we can keep that momentum going. But yeah, I think that will do it for me. Definitely let me know how your reading went in May, what you thought of any of the books that I talked about. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!